We've been raised inside conditions that we didn't choose, taught to perform our way through leadership, through beauty, through worth. Perform until it's so numbing that we forget who we are. And if you want to remember, if you want to lead from that place inside of you that's real, if you want to build something entirely new or be a part of something that's different from what you see out there, this is what we're talking about. I'm Katrina DeAngelis, leadership strategist, regenerative business architect, and bridge builder between worlds. And here we dismantle what's extractive, compost what's over, and rebuild in real time. We move from performative leadership to leadership that's relational, from burnout to regenerative capacity building, and from tuned out to fully tuned in. We become co-creators with the systems that we are shaping, and we build new ones. Here you'll get practical tools, guided audios, unfiltered conversations with leaders who are doing this out loud and in real time with you. And if you want to move beyond the molds that you hold, click the link in your bio for a free 4-week journey to repattern your leadership. Let's dive in. Have you ever been called divisive when you named something that you felt was harmful? You're not crazy. And I want to dive in today to the stages of collective development, unpack the systems around you and us. So let's talk about why calling out harm gets mistaken for being divisive and what it says about the culture that we're living in. Every stage of consciousness has a shadow when we look at collective development and also individual development. Today, we're talking about collective consciousness and collective stages of development. So this is how we organize as a society, who has rights, what is considered normal or moral, and so on. We live in a time where speaking truth actually sounds divisive. And when I say truth, I don't mean this post-truth Trump world where truth holds no value, but where we speak actual truth about the harm that words cause, about divisiveness, about our collective. This leads to when people stand up and protect boundaries, we get labeled as hate, when actual hate is free speech, where compassion without clarity is collapsing. So if you have ever hesitated to call something out because you didn't want to be named divisive or that you're starting drama, then this is for you, because when you don't call out harm, that is actually divisive. And today we're going to unpack the difference between being divisive and calling out harm. Truly calling out harm is the most integral, compassionate thing that you can do. Moving into a more integral stage of development, we want to talk about how we can pair compassion and empathy with discernment and clarity and hold space for the collective as a whole. No more of this, my truth versus your truth, and everyone gets to have their own truth. That's fine. But when we talk about integral stage of development, we are talking about holding space for truth that serves the whole. It does require a larger perspective and including all parts of that whole and understanding the interdynamics that shape them and how your words and what you say and how you contribute and what you listen to and what you amplify shapes that whole. So let's dive in. Today I want to share a little bit of my own journey and give you some context about these different stages of development that we're all collectively moving through. This framework is called Spiral Dynamics, and it's deeply inspired both my life and my own development and also how I see the world. Now, Spiral Dynamics was originally coined by Claire Graves and then later further developed by Don Beck and Christopher Cohen. It helps us understand how human consciousness evolves over time, both individually and collectively. Basically, it's like a map of how societies and individuals grow and how we organize and gather. And, we've moved from 100,000 years ago, survival and being in caves, to power dynamics and ego emerged, the sense of I, the sense of we. We went from tradition to hierarchy to modern individualism to postmodern inclusion, which is the green stage that I'll talk about. And each of these stages have its own strengths and shadows. And this is an important key factor here because each stage reaches a tension point where the current way of gathering and being in the world is no longer supportive, and there's key contradictions and tensions that force growth and collective evolution into the next stage. Keep that in mind because you're going to see how that shows up as we go through some of these stages. A quick example of that is the blue stage, which was about 500,000 BCE. There was massive chaos, right? We were still living very much in tribes. Our rights were dependent on what tribe we were in. Either you were in the tribe or you were out of the tribe, and you protected the people that were in the tribe. Blue came around, creating order and divine hierarchy. This is where you start to see religion pop up and medieval kingdoms and father knows best. So this rises in about the 1950s. Rights at that time were conditional upon obedience and authority. So we got justice and stability and civilization moving from a more barbaric or tribalistic time. Eventually, as a humanity and as a collective, we outgrew blind faith and craved freedom, progress, and merit over simply birth. This is when we move into more achievement, science, and competition. This is where capitalism is born. And this is also where equality is born. All men are created equal. Now, stay with me, because at this time, and this was about 1776, when all men are created equal and the Constitution is made, and this is coming from people who still own slaves. So that's a contradiction here. That contradiction is later going to force the evolution. Of course, it takes time. So that contradiction led to the birth of the green era. And that's where a lot of this actually finding my feet around, am I being divisive or am I actually standing up for the whole and humanity, really emerges, because the green era is all about everyone's voice matters. The system is rigged. We got to get back to community over competition. It was the antidote to extractive capitalism. We have DEI, climate justice, social movements, check your privilege, and really rights became more universal and extended to all humans increasingly, and even to nature. And so the gift of this time is really inclusion, compassion, systems awareness. And you can see how this tension now emerges with where we are right now as a collective and a society, with people actually degrading into levels of development and stages of development, or the tension creating people and groups to regress or to stand more strongly in that stage. This is what I'm going to speak to a lot when I talk about, are you being divisive, or actually by avoiding saying that, are you actually contributing to harm? Because there's a really big nuance here. So you might be wondering, why am I always clashing with my family or my friends or people on social media? It's because we're all in different stages. If you're interested in learning more, we will unpack the stages of development together in another video. Some of your relatives see the green, more the newest developmental stage, destroying order and tradition. And then you see other people seeing green as destroying merit and responsibility. And then the greens, who I consider myself to be in over the last few years, see the other stages as protecting oppression. So it's not even just about disagreeing. We're literally saying things different, and we're at different stages of developments in terms of the language that we're using, what we're putting importance on, and so on. And so this is actually really important to understand the people around you, and to be able to spot harm versus potentially just needing to change the conversation to have a more productive conversation based on what is important to that stage of development. And this is where it becomes really important to understand language that causes harm. Is this thought, this opinion, if everyone were to believe this, would this be a world I want to be a part of? Does this thought require me to think of somebody else as less than? Does this thought require me to believe that somebody is more deserving than somebody else, or that I'm more deserving of somebody else, or that my group of people is more deserving than somebody else? These are the languages to look out for when you're trying to determine, is this discernment or is this divisiveness? Key difference. Okay, so I went on a little bit of tangent there. But today I want to get honest about my own personal reflection that I've been having over the past few months on my journey and stages of development, and my transition from wanting to shift from green, that is inclusive, compassionate, and really wants to include all, to teal, which is second tier thinking, and is actually, it's green paired with discernment, it's compassion, it's empathy paired with perspective. And so we'll get a little bit more into that, because it's super important to, again, deciding, Am I divisive or am I discerning? As I mentioned, each of these stages of development have their own shadows and strengths. So for example, in the early stages, it's all about basic survival. You're just trying to get your needs met. We're waking up in a cave, hungry. It's about sex, survival, and really individual survival. This is even before we gathered in tribes. Then we move into stages where it's more about power and dominance. People started to realize that through my will, I can dominate, I can lead, I can gain more. And then it becomes my group versus yours and this fight for survival. And then from there, we move more into the traditional stages that rely on rule and order. And this is when we see the rise of modern religions and religions being used as a way to direct order and control. And then we move into the more modern stages that value individual success and progress. And this is where you're going to see capitalism on the rise and the industrial era, and really a lot of progress is made in this era. And then finally we arrive at the green stage. And this is where we look at empathy, inclusion, making sure that everyone has what they need or that everyone's perspective is valued. And this is the civil rights movement, for example, and women's rights and LGBTQ, and also the environmental movement. And this is where a lot of us are now. And so you can kind of see this fight or tension between the green and the earlier stages. So fighting for progress, inclusion, perspective, empathy, compassion, and equity, and then people that are protecting the earlier stages of development and what was important there. So sometimes it can be a struggle with setting boundaries, because in the green, my green people, you want to include everyone and respect everyone's opinion. But now we're running into this issue where there's very harmful opinions out there that need to be challenged and individually unpacked and collectively unpacked. And so it's this balance between wanting to include everyone and respect everyone, and also being discerning about things that actually either do support the collective whole or don't. Moving from green to teal and really this second tier thinking, which I'm not going to go too much into today, but I'm happy to dive into it because I love this stuff. It's really about moving from empathy and compassion and everyone having an equal seat at the table to everyone is welcome to that seat at the table, but with discernment about what causes harm and what actually supports the collective and the whole, or what doesn't. And so here's where my own journey comes in, because over the past year, I realized that I was living in that green space. I wanted to include everyone, and sometimes feeling stuck when it came to calling harmful perspectives, because I can understand and see everyone's perspective and a lot of perspectives. And a lot of the time it comes from trauma, and trauma is being used against us or weaponized. And so I'm always, keeping this in the back of my mind, that I find it difficult to hold space for my own discernment and to call harm when I see it. And that's why a lot of the time nowadays when you speak up, if it's coming from a place of discernment and you're spotting that harm, you can be labeled divisive. And this is really important. Like if you've ever even labeled somebody as divisive for this reason, I want you to reflect on that, because there's a difference between being divisive and discerning. There's a difference between calling out and calling in. Okay, so what we want to do is hold space for that discernment and really challenge our own beliefs, challenge the information that we take in. Doesn't matter if we, how much we love someone, but really being discerning about the information that we allow to impact us. And a lot of the times it's generational trauma or our circles or a tribe or a family that really are going to bring up the most challenging tensions within us. And so it's about recognizing, yes, you want to include everyone, you want to include everyone's opinion, but we also need to protect the integrity of the whole. And that is more important than ever right now. So when someone says that you're being divisive, what might actually be happening is a clash between these stages. They might still be in a place where conflict feels like a threat. But in reality, we're just moving into a stage where empathy needs to be paired with boundaries and discernment. And it's not about losing compassion, but it is about evolving it in service of the whole. One question I love to ask myself when somebody either says something to me, or I read a headline or see something on social media, and my tendency is to want to include that perspective because I want to be inclusive of all, is that if this message rippled outwards, if everyone believed it, built systems around it, what world would it create? Would it expand safety, freedom, shared humanity, or does it erode dignity of some? Does it deepen division? And this is actually where you want to check in with, are you being divisive or are you calling out harm? Because a lot of the things we're hearing nowadays actually deepen division. They erode dignity of someone else, and they require you or me to hold somebody else as less than in order for my own survival, or in order for my people to be okay, or in order for my perspective of the world to be protected. So think, does this thought, does this question, does this perspective, is it rooted in fear and separation or love and connection? If it asks me to see someone as an enemy, what happens if that message takes hold? If it implies that some lives matter more or less, what kind of future does that build? If this message feels harmful, pause and dig even deeper. Who does this message serve? What is the impact and behaviors that emerge of believing this message? Harmful messages don't exist by accident. They're designed to benefit somebody, and oftentimes we are being exploited. Our trauma is being exploited in order to serve somebody else's power, ego, and control. So our power, my power now that I know, is in noticing and choosing whether to participate in it or not, to rewrite the message, to call out harm when I see it. And now I know that that is not me being divisive. Of course, when practicing something new, it's going to be clunky, but it is me holding space for the collective. And it's no longer about agreeing or disagreeing or holding space for everybody's truth. It is about living, leading, and amplifying the messages that are in service to the collective, to the whole. It's about tracing the impact and deciding which messages we allow to shape us, which messages we allow to shape the future, and which ones we amplify. So that, my friends, is my invitation to you. When you feel like you are being divisive or somebody's calling you divisive, ask yourself, is this me being divisive or is it me being discerning? When someone says you're being divisive, what actually might be happening is a clash between the stages. They might feel like conflict is a threat, but in reality, we're just moving into a stage where empathy and boundaries go hand in hand, and it's not about losing compassion, but it is about evolving it. All right, friends, if you're interested in learning more about spiral dynamics and stages of development, then I'm your girl. Please reach out, and I'm happy to do some more videos. I hope that was helpful and not divisive, but clear. All right, see you soon. Thanks for tuning in and for being part of the Real-Time Rebuild. We hope you got something from this and would love to hear from you. Connect with us on Instagram or Katrina DeAngelis on LinkedIn. And if you're ready to move beyond the molds that you've been handed, click on the link in the description to get access to our 4-week journey to repattern your leadership. Share this with a fellow bridge builder who's ready to build something different. Let's co-create the next paradigm and make it real.